Hey, peace. What's happening, everyone? On out there, Lloyd.
Recognize royalty. Recognize royalty. Gotta recognize it. Recognize royalty. Like they ain't got eyes to recognize royalty.
It didn't, and I always say this, I doubt that they understood what these people were being sold into. Because how could they have any idea? It's not like anyone ever came back to tell the story.
That's lie number two. They knew exactly what was going on because of the non-returns decades later. Okay, we were never returned to them. They had a clue what was going on. They had a clue that they were selling people to never to return back to Africa. They totally understood what was going
on. So to be clear, did they have a clue that they were never going to return? Or did they have a clue that they were being sold into chattel slavery? I don't think Ron is clear on which question he's answering or which question is being asked of him. But I think what the lady was saying was that the Africans didn't have a clue that they were being sold into chattel slavery, or rather that they were selling people into chattel slavery, which is this, lifetime where your descendants are enslaved type of slavery. Like, did they know that that's what they were setting them up for? And Ron is correct. If the question is, did they know they were being sold to never return? Then yeah, the thing was called the door of no return. So they may have known about that, but the question is, again, did they know that they were going to be sold, that they were being sold into this chattel slavery? And so I thought that getting a timeline for, the evolution of slavery in America would kind of help us to answer those questions. And ChatGPT did in fact provide a timeline of what it calls the legal evolution of slavery in America. And this came through me asking about Anthony Johnson being the first slave, because that was really interesting to me. And through that discussion, it provided the timeline of that legal evolution of slavery. And it says 1619, the first Africans arrive in Virginia. A Dutch ship brings about 20 Africans to Jamestown, Virginia. And this 1619 date doesn't, in my head, contradict the 1526 date. This 1619 date is when the first Africans arrived in Virginia. 1526 may be when the first slave, or it's going to be when the first slaves arrived in some other state. But regardless of that, it says a Dutch ship brings about 20 Africans to Jamestown, Virginia. They are treated as indentured servants, not slaves for life, and some later gain freedom and land. And so I think that alone should answer the question. When they first came to Virginia, they were treated as indentured servants, not as slaves. And certainly it says not slaves for life, so not chattel slavery. And some even gained their freedom and was able to buy land. So did they know that they were being sold into chattel slavery? No. Did these African sellers know that they were selling them into chattel slavery? No, because chattel slavery evolved decades, if not centuries, after this initial selling of slaves, like while that started. Now, later on we'll speak to, as time went by and chattel slavery did become a thing, did those African sellers at that time know about it and still provided slaves? That will be a separate question. But for now, we're talking about those original Africans that were selling them. And I guess the answer to that at this point is no. But let's continue because this is interesting. It says in 1655, Anthony Johnson versus John Casser. Anthony Johnson, a free black man, wins a court case declaring John Casser his servant for life. This becomes the first legal recognition of lifelong servitude or slavery in an English colony. Interestingly enough, the first legal recognition of chattel slavery is Anthony Johnson, a black man, an FBA, if you will, absolutely an FBA. An FBA was the first legally recognized case of chattel slavery in America. In 1661, the first official slavery law, the Virginia colony passes the first statute explicitly recognizing slavery. It legalizes the enslavement of non-Christian servants brought to the colony. So Anthony Johnson is 1655, and the first official slavery law was 1661. And, that's a few decades after 1619 and 1526 when slaves were coming in. So when those first slaves were coming in, they were coming in as indentured servants, not as slaves, and certainly not as chattel slaves or being under chattel slavery. In 1662, the Status of Children Law, Virginia enacts a law stating that a child's legal status follows the mother's condition. This means children born to enslaved women are automatically slaves, making slavery hereditary. In 1667, the Baptism Law, a new law, declares that baptism does not grant freedom. Before this, some enslaved Africans sought conversion to Christianity, hoping it might secure their release. The 1670s, expansion of racial boundaries. Laws are introduced restricting land ownership and rights for free blacks. Racial distinctions between black slaves and white servants become legally fixed. And so this late or mid 17th century, in the 1660s, 1670s, and going into the 18th century is when really the laws started to change, and where these indentured servants moved to become just slaves. In 1705, the Virginia Slave Codes, the sweeping code defines all enslaved Africans and their descendants as property or chattel. It outlines punishments, ownership rights, and limits on interaction between enslaved and free people. These codes become a model for other colonies. Okay, so let's put a stamp on it. It was the 1705 Virginia Slave Codes. That's when chattel slavery started. I think that's a good date to work with. So the 18th century, the very start of the 18th century. So given that, if we say slavery in America was happening from the 15th or rather the 16th century, it wasn't until the 18th. So they went through 2 decades. We can say they went through, 2 centuries, from the 16th century to the 18th century, without chattel slavery being a real thing. And so that's 2 centuries. And so those African sellers for those 2 centuries could not have known they were selling their people, quote unquote, into chattel slavery. In 1750 to 1776, slavery is entrenched. By the mid-17th century, slavery is legally institutionalized across the southern colonies and deeply tied to the plantation economy. Northern colonies begin gradual restrictions, but slavery remains widespread until the Revolutionary Era. So granted that the first 2 centuries, there was no slavery. There was just indentured servitude. For those first 2 centuries, that's the most we can say that Africans knew, if they knew what was going to happen. They knew that it was, or they thought it was just indentured servitude. And again, that's if they knew at all. Because that's what it was. It was indentured servitude for the first 2 centuries, and really chattel slavery didn't really come into the picture until 1705, which is the early 18th century. From there, and from 1705 onwards is the only time period that we could say that those African sellers knew that they were selling them into chattel slavery. And again, that's going to be if they knew, because it's not, did they know about the system of slavery in America and how it was evolving legally? I don't know. Is it possible? Yes. Is it possible that they didn't? Sure. So it kind of goes both ways, I think. The answer to the question of did African sellers know they were selling them into chattel slavery? The answer is going to be no. And then it could be yes as well after that 1705 date when chattel slavery really began. Because if they were still sending slaves, then it's a chance they knew. Yeah. As to the question of did they know they were selling their fellow Africans? I think that may go both ways as well. Was there this one big view of all of us are all Africans at that time? No. Was there any type of view of this type of connection between all people on the continent in any way at that time? No. So in that respect, did they know they were selling their fellow Africans into slavery? No. But I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but this was centuries of the European buyers referring to us all as Negroes, right? So they referred to us all in the same, using the same language. And I'm presuming they did. I'm presuming that those Portuguese that went in there referring to, were referring to them all as Negroes. And I don't think that they made a distinction. I would imagine that they did not make a distinction. And so could those African sellers have recognized that in the eyes of the European buyers, they were all, one people, they were all kind of the same because they referred to them all as the same? It's possible. It's possible. But I think that their tribal connections would have likely overridden that. So I'm going to say I'm leaning towards no, they didn't know they were selling their fellow Africans. I think it's more likely that they were selling their enemies in their eyes. So yeah. So I guess that's my best answer to that question. I hope it satisfies you enough to hit the like button and to subscribe, as well as hitting that notification bell. It means a lot. You don't know. We're gonna catch you on the next one. Peace.
I want you to listen very, very carefully.
Tell the youth them to be strong. You can't tell the youth them for preach wrongs. While you trod it on these lands, just remember every man is equal. Yeah, each one teach one. And a father God, him a the only done. So make we ease and reason. Smoke trees, span the ends, all the deep meds. Take a look at life and don't close your eyes. Sometimes things happen and it's no surprise. And I just so it go, so it go, so it go, so it go. It's a government no have no heart, them no care about poor people. Yeah, bigger heads no love people again. Them worse than Hitler them. Me see friends now reason again. Vex through whistle a blame. More time it hurt me to see how the face deal with the eagle of them. Regular me see it a pain. Regular me see it a pain. Take a look at life and don't close your eyes. Sometimes things happen and it's no surprise. And I just so it go, so it go, so it go, so it go. It's a government no have no heart, them no care about poor people. Social commentary. Drop that one, your principle, you don't know. The global will come and do it. Some people life every day, it's stress. The high price from JPS, that topic is currently. Jah alone, him a go help you. We need food, cause we no healthy. We are feel the pain, beg you protect we. In our life, we have no fenve. Take a look at life and don't close your eyes. Sometimes things happen and it's no surprise. And I just so it go, so it go, so it go, so it go. It's a government no have no heart, them no care about poor people.